It is Friday, May 31st. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Astro Bot episode of LTPS. It's been a very busy week. There's a ton going on. The business segment briefing, the state of play, the days of play promotion, and everything else in between. So we've got a lot to go over. So let's begin, as always, with a very brief reminder for the PS Plus Essential May lineup. Claim those games before they go away. This is your last call. June 4th, it's going to change over to SpongeBob SquarePants, The Cosmic Shake, PS4, PS5, AEW Fight Forever, PS4, PS5, and Streets of Rage 4, PS4 as well, which this lineup on its own is not the best. I mean, I do like SpongeBob. I know there are a lot of wrestling fans out there, but those are not really going to pull much weight. I will say Streets of Rage 4 is an absolute banger, so that one is very good, but not really looking too strong on the lineup this month. What we can say is that Sony actually announced this next to the Days of Play promotion all in one blog post, so we've actually got a lot going on here. The one thing being they're actually extending EA Sports FC 24 from the May lineup, so actually you do have some time for that game. That extends to June 18th, but really the bigger news here is we have bonus titles for PS Plus Extra and Premium, and these very much are bonus titles, as in there's still a June lineup that will get announced during the regular time, but for now we've got some bonus titles available right now and more coming out on a rolling basis. So as of right now for PS Plus Extra, you can also download and play Dredge, PS4, PS5, and also LEGO Marvel Superheroes 2. And then later on June 5th, Cricket 24 will be available. And then on June 7th, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the Definitive Edition as well, PS4, PS5. Now the really cool thing is that we've also got PSVR 2 games being introduced into PS Plus Premium, so this will be for premium members, but if you have PSVR 2, then you now have access to these games, or rather you'll have access to these games on June 6th. That's Ghostbusters Rise of the Ghost Lord, Walkabout Mini Golf, Synth Riders, Before Your Eyes, and The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Chapter 1 and 2. Now I will tell you right now, if you have PSVR 2 and if you've not played Before Your Eyes, do it. My God, that game is beautiful, amazing, heartwarming. Just there's so many layers to that game, and I think that's about all you need to know. Just dive in, don't listen to anything else. It's an incredible experience in VR, but I think it's excellent. So the other, and let's be honest, this is probably the biggest news item here for PS Plus and also Days of Play possibly, but the PS2 games finally confirmed. So that's how Sony did this. They announced it right on the PS blog. New PS2 games finally coming. We saw one pop up on the PSN backend initially. That was Star Wars Clone Wars, but there's two more, and these will be available on Premium on June 11th, and those games are Tomb Raider Legend, Star Wars The Clone Wars, as we just said, but also Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. And I am so excited for that because this is exactly what I was expecting going into this. Now, I will say Tomb Raider Legend, that's also a very big surprise, which is cool to see that. But, dialing back to the conversation about when we saw Star Wars pop up on the PSN backend, and it's like, okay, great, we finally know more PS2 games are coming. This is implicit conversions, where that's the company Sony contracts out, right? So it's their in-house syrup emulation engine with the save states, rewinds, video presets for the PS1, PSP titles. This is going to come for PS2 eventually at some point, so we can get new PS2 games. But, I said right in that conversation, we can look at publisher support for the PS1 and PSP titles, and that's where we have to set expectations. We can't make this laundry list of licensing nightmares that are stuck on PS2. But the good news is Sony has been leaning heavily on their own IP. So for PS2, ding, 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 this means Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, the God of War games. Many of these titles are pretty much locked on PS2 or PS3 because with PS3, the problem there obviously is they have to be streamed. And you're just not going to get, I would assume you're never going to see straight ports of those games. This is the good and, if anything, more appropriate answer. Because in many ways, the PS2 versions of these games are better anyway. So yeah, and the better part is that we've seen that usually it's only the Sony IP that get trophy support as well. So that also means another full platinum more than likely for Sly Cooper. And so that is just awesome. I'm happy that we're opening this right away with PlayStation IP being Sly Cooper. That's one of my favorite PlayStation 2 games, one of my favorite platformers, period. I love that franchise so much. So it's awesome that Sly is coming back, and now we'll probably see more Sly Cooper entries, Ratchet and Clank, God of War, and many other PS2, PlayStation IP staples. Now, going back to what I just said, as a reminder, they're all bonus games. So we're still getting a proper June lineup for PS Plus Extra and Premium, because this was all part of the Days of Play promotion, which we can now talk about that. So for 2024 Days of Play, Sony's doing a number of extra goodies, that being PSN avatars, free avatars, I should say, also a PlayStation Stars campaign, and a new PlayStation tournament for EA Sports FC 24. Now, as far as sales go, $50 off, for an example, here in the US for a PS5 disc or digital console, and also $100 off both PSVR 2 bundles, so that's the standard one and also the Horizon bundle. If you have a Plus membership and you buy the console or VR hardware from PS Direct, you also get 12 months of Netflix Premium for free, so not a bad deal there. I mean, that's like an extra $100-something of value, so if you're going to use Netflix, you might as well do that, or you can just give that to a friend or hand it off to somebody else. So really, if you're going to buy hardware, probably do that from PS Direct. Then there's also sales for various games, and just the console covers is what it looks like for accessories. There's nothing off on the controllers, it seems, which is kind of a bummer, but for PS Plus memberships, you can get 30% off on a new plan, or existing Essential members can get 25% off an upgrade to Extra on the remainder of their membership, or 30% off upgrading to Premium, again for the remainder of their membership. And that offer is only valid until June 12th. And then you can also get 15% off on select Sony Pictures movies on the Sony Pictures Core app. And then for merchandise, that's 20% off on the PlayStation Gear Store. And then, of course, there's various game sales on PSN as well. So, yeah, this year, Days of Play, the bonus games are great. The sales themselves, I mean, unless you're going to, buy hardware or upgrade from your Plus membership, then that's really the only thing here, I think. I believe that's what they did last year, though, is that they didn't offer controllers on sale. And then for Plus memberships, yeah, you have to either not have a membership or at least go from Essential to Extra or Extra to Premium. You can't extend your membership on any of those with a discount, which is restrictive, but I think that's how they did it last year. Now, getting into our next news story, let's talk about Sony's State of Play presentation that aired just yesterday, which was not a showcase, and we talked about that on the predictions video on Wednesday, and also yesterday we did a full reactions, impressions, so if you haven't seen the event just yet, you can go watch it with me. That's on the channel right now, but in the here and now, here's a very brief recap on every single announcement. So, as for PS Studios, we got Concord gameplay. The beta test is in July. The game's coming out August 23rd. God of War Ragnarok PC is coming out September 19th. Until Dawn got a new trailer coming out fall this year. Astro Bot was announced for September 6th. Silent Hill 2 is coming October 8th. And then third party was Dynasty Warriors Origins, Ballad of Antara, Marvel Rivals, Monster Hunter Wilds, Alien Rogue Incursion for PSVR 2, Behemoth for PSVR 2, Where Winds Meet, Infinity, Nikki, and Path of Exile 2. So that was the entire State of Play. Not bad in my view, considering we knew exactly what Sony was going to show during this event, because State of Plays, they will outline exactly what this is. 14 games, PS Studio titles shipping this year, so we've now got a good idea of that. And, again, the impressions I already did yesterday. I feel about the same as I did, because that was only a few hours ago for me, but you're watching this on Friday, obviously. Either way, let's go into the actual news story here, which is Astro Bot details. So Astro Bot was easily the highlight of the State of Play, I think, for a lot of people, which was so encouraging for this IP, and we have more details for this game on the PlayStation blog. So this Astro Bot game coming out on September 6th, which it is called just Astro Bot, is going to feature over 80 levels across 6 galaxies. Astro now has 15 new abilities, over 15 new abilities, I should say. The game will once again heavily lean into the DualSense haptics and triggers. There's over 70 new enemy types. The PlayStation references from Astro's Playroom are playing a bigger role this time around, where there's more of them, and they'll be tied to the plot in some way. That's at least what they're inferring there. And pre-orders open June 7th, so not too long there. I am curious as to what they will price the game at. I think we were always expecting this to be like a $40, $50 game. If it's lower, great. I think that would be awesome if they were really bold enough and said, and this is a $30 game. But honestly, if it's up to 50, I think they're going to earn it here, because it's crazy how much positivity I'm seeing on my timeline for this game. I am so happy, because this game is Astro's Playroom extended into a full-scale game and leaning into everything that made Astro's Playroom so, cute and adorable and fun to play, and such a feel-good, platformer that embraces PlayStation history. There is so much to love about Playroom, so very happy to see that it's getting this full-scale release at retail so we can see what people are willing to pay for this game. And it's the other thing I'll say about this too is that it's really fascinating watching this play out for two camps, right, with Astro, which is primarily a lot of positivity. A lot of people are like, yo, this looks dope. I am so down. I'm ready to play it because Astro's Playroom was free, pre-installed in every PS5. That was the first time Astro really had wide exposure. The other camp are some that, and you know who you are. You're a true OG if you were messing with Astro on PS4 with the Playroom camera, PS4 camera, I should say, or Astro Bot Rescue Mission with PSVR. So some are definitely upset, not having PSVR 2 support, which I would agree. I think the perfect balance would have been PSVR 2 support with a 2D mode as well. But, I gotta say, if it's one or the other, this IP needs to be 2D and it needs to be available for everyone. And who knows, maybe Team Asobi will actually do some sort of VR edition down the road or something as a free update or whatever the case is. I'm not sure exactly what the development pipeline was for this game. Typically, you want to support VR from the very beginning. In my head, I think the right call was this game needs to be 2D for everybody. But, unironically, this is going to be a very big release for PlayStation 5's holiday season, really fall season. So I am, without a doubt, extremely excited. I think it looks unbelievably good. Now, on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, we also have Concord, which is not being received nearly as well. So this game got a 10-minute plus debut on the State of Play, which it did need, right, because it's coming out this year, and until the State of Play, we had no idea what it was going to be. We only knew sci-fi, PvP, first-person shooter from a newly acquired PS studio that Sony acquired from Probably Monsters after initially signing the game on. So based off that alone, I was actually quite interested in terms of what this game was going to be. But what we now know, it's very much a character-driven first-person shooter set in the Concord Galaxy 5v5. That's how the PS blog is describing it. And yeah, the game's getting a lot of flack right now, which I'll say this. It's not deserved, but I think it's a very fair criticism given that the way the game looks, the way it was presented, it's like, okay, where have we seen this before? Everywhere. Like, oh, a hero shooter, great. Very colorful characters that are trying to be funny and on the nose. And so I think it's a fair criticism given it can easily be lost in the mix. I myself was not expecting this to be a hero shooter. I mean, I didn't even consider that it could be that. But then again, you kind of think back to how this game was initially signed on, where then Sony, I guess at a certain milestone build point in the game and the development cycle, they thought, you know what, if we can work out a deal, let's bring in the entire studio. So while this game is surely not for me, I'm pretty much checked out of Concord. Maybe I'll play it when it comes out. But what I will say is you never know, right? By the time this game comes out, well, the beta, I should say, should give people a good indicator of how fun it is. But you never know. Maybe the gameplay loop, especially on PC, maybe folks will really enjoy it and we'll see some sort of, similar Helldivers 2 thing where nobody thought it would take off, but maybe it will. Maybe the gameplay loop is there. Sony generally does have very good talent-seeking people and more so carefully watching the development cycle through milestone builds and figuring out when they should or should not pull support, which we know nowadays they're going to be a lot more picky with that. So yeah, it's not a game for me, but I will reserve judgment, and I think most people should reserve judgment until the game comes out because you never know. But yeah, that was interesting. As far as the entire State of Play, though, with, I guess, the disappointment of, oh, not a showcase, and yeah, Summer Games Fest is coming up, we can mention that the one very well-known leaker that's been blowing up recently, Midori on X, they mentioned that SIE titles will be at Summer Games Fest. Which, look, you didn't need Midori to tell you that. We know Sony is going to give Jeff Keighley something, but yeah, we'll wait to see what's at Summer Games Fest, and then we can have a better conversation of, what we can expect from PS Studios after that. Now, one other post-State of Play news story we can mention is that for God of War Ragnarok on PC and also Until Dawn, the Steam and Epic Game Store listings are going live right now, so this is like brand new info. Maybe this will change by the time I upload this, but it does appear as though you will need a PSN ID to play these games on Steam or the Epic Game Store, which these are both primarily single-player games. Not primarily, they're only single-player. So that is a far cry from the optional ID on Helldivers 2 or the optional ID for the single-player campaign of Tsushima. So what's going on here? I don't know. I will say this to me immediately reads as a Band-Aid thing. As in, if Sony wants PSN IDs to be a thing on PC, I feel like this is it. Like, they're just ripping it off and they're just going to take the brunt of it right here, right now. Maybe Tsushima got off because it was like a close proximity to the Helldivers 2 fiasco, but that's got to be what this is, because I'll tell you, and I always said too, like, this is a good opportunity for Sony to get on the good side of PC gamers for shipping on PC. Like, this is an audience that, you know, if you cater to their needs and their wants and you do things that other publishers are not doing, like, you can get on their good side. But I think that's already like out the window. The PSN link from Helldivers 2 has really ruined their reputation. And I don't know if this is just a matter of, like, you know, at a cursory glance, if you like skim through Reddit or other PC communities and just, you know, that's one of those things where it's very anecdotal. I'm not sure how representative that is of the entire PC audience that would want to buy and play these games. But I'll tell you, like, the reputation is just piss poor. People hate Sony. Like, straight up, everywhere you go. I don't care. I'll wait. Screw you guys. I'm just not making a PSN ID. I guess I'm not buying your games. I'll never buy your console. I mean, it's like brutal. There is nobody that's like, yeah, whatever, every game does this. I guess I'll just, you know, get over it. And nobody's doing that, right? So it's a very bad reputation. I think it's like out the window. This has got to be something where Sony's just like, okay, rip the Band-Aid off. Like, PSN IDs required, which, I mean, for single-player games, like, you don't have to do that, you know? Always make it optional for single-player. Have incentives with the PlayStation overlay and things like that. I mean, I don't know if this is the way to do it, but obviously this is also a developing story, so we'll keep following it and see if it changes. But for now, that is on the listing for both of these games. Now, in other PlayStation PC adjacent news, we can also mention something that is good, and that is a PSVR 2 PC adapter. It looks like Sony is finally getting ready to properly support PSVR 2 on PC. So this was spotted by Brad Lynch over on X, where SI has registered the device in Korea. So we can see that there's now this new PSVR 2 PC adapter, which, as we've said before, PSVR 2 single USB-C cable carries 12-volt power, and also the display data together. So depending on what GPU you have, you either need a virtual link port or you need the virtual link adapter, which I don't even think got off the ground. Like, that's not a thing you can just easily go out and get. So pretty much this thing was always going to need a PC adapter, and it looks like Sony is now getting that ready, which will probably be a very similar rollout to the existing camera adapter for PSVR 1. If you have the serial number for your PSVR, you can probably request one, or I would also hope that they'll start shipping this with PSVR 2 units at some point once they've got this thing ready to go. But it's still, I would assume this means the gates are open. They're just going to let this thing be used for PC VR, and they're not going to lock it down to a set number of games or anything like that. This is probably, well, not probably, this is the way to go for making sure PSVR 2 hardware is relevant going into you know, its later years, which so far have seemingly not been great. Moving on to Sony's 2024 business segment briefing. This is where the leadership for the separate subsidiaries talks about the state of the business, where they're planning on going, answering questions from investors. And so for SIE, we have a 40-minute presentation, both from Herman Hulst and Hideaki Nishino, the soon-to-be CEOs of the Platform Business Group and Studio Business Group, that actually does not go into effect until tomorrow. So technically, they're still SVPs, but we have a lot to go over. So these are primarily the more interesting bullet point things from the presentation. So Starting off, Hideaki Nishino begins with the Platform Business Group, and we're hearing that PS5 has so far been the most profitable PlayStation to date, exceeding PS4 by a fair amount. As for the monthly active users, which as we've heard already is 118 million, we've actually got an exact ratio here, so it's right down the middle. It's indeed 49 million on PS4, 49 on PS5. PS3 and Vita combined, I'd personally assume that's well under a million now, so that's probably not a big contributor. But life-to-date spend is still higher on PS5 as well, so not much has changed there. Across peripherals, services, content add-on, and full game content, it's all higher spend on PS5. As for a breakdown of content revenue, it's mostly right down the middle. Your big live service games like Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, Fortnite, these are all more than 50% of revenue. The other 50 goes to thousands of other games on PSN. For PS Plus, over 35% are subscribed to PlayStation Plus Extra or Premium. That's up 5% from last year, so assuming the overall number of Plus subscribers has not changed, which Sony no longer discloses, then more people are subscribing to the higher tiers and also at a higher price as well. Going into the R&D engineering side, they touch on a hybrid cloud approach, so that's utilizing AI to drive enterprise-wide efficiencies and enhancing player experience. And then for the Platform Business Group goals, they outlined that for fiscal year 21 to 23, the focus was on establishing a leading position in the console generation, but going into fiscal year 24 to 26, the focus is driving sustainable and profitable growth, with a key bullet point mentioning they want to manage the cost structure and invest in future efficiencies. Now, going into the studio business group, where Herman Hulst is now presenting, he opens with this slide where he breaks down their studios. Most of this seems about right, so under single-player narrative experiences, you have Team Asobi, Insomniac, Santa Monica, Sucker Punch, Naughty Dog, Firesprite, and also Housemarque. And then under live service, you have San Diego Studio, Bungie, Firewall, Haven, and Neon Koi. Neon Koi being their one mobile team, where that was basically guaranteed to be live service due to how mobile games primarily operate nowadays. And then under evolving multi-genre, that's Guerrilla, Polyphony, Metamolecule, and Bend. This can probably be interpreted as multiple projects or a mix of single-player and multiplayer, or things that don't necessarily hinge on a narrative-driven single-player campaign. And then going into partner studios, we see Nixus, Valkyrie Entertainment, and then also Bluepoint Games, which is maybe the more questionable thing here. We'll talk about that later. And then going into another slide that shows off their IP. This is ranked on the right side by emerging IP, so that's on the bottom, that being Fair Games, Concord, and Marathon, and then going up to IP that expands the audience, and then the very top, major franchises. I think the only thing we can point out here is that the Uncharted logo might seem out of place next to everything else that's seen more relevant recent releases, but I assume the middle placement is referring to how the PC release of the Legacy of Thieves collection is meant to reach a new audience, and so it's not directly referring to a new title, even though we have had one rumored for a while. Herman also shows off this hierarchy of portfolio management, so tentpole releases is still the biggest focus, and that includes new IP. The middle portion of investment is live service, and then the bottom is experimental, which Herman does say this portion does see a limited budget, but if a game is able to prove its success, then they will expand upon it. This is also where Herman confirms that each holiday season, they plan to have at least one tentpole release going forward. Marvel Spider-Man 2 has now sold through 11 million units as of April 20th, 2024. Herman Hulst says they're also expanding on that relationship with Marvel, and due to the Insomniac breach, this news should not be all too surprising, assuming things internally have not changed much since the, post-layoffs, I should say. And then as for developing new technology and trying to pioneer new game development advancements, AI is the name of the game here, so they specifically mention 3D asset creation, face generation, code assist, and speech localization. So right now, a lot of this is not too different from what we heard last year, that being PS5 has a higher average spend across all these different categories, which falls back on things costing more in general. Now, people are playing more games overall, that's true, the engagement is higher, but PS Plus costs more, content add-on costs more, and people are buying more of it. MSRP for games is higher, same for hardware, which PS4 on a launch line basis saw a permanent price cut at this point, so PS5 is indeed the most profitable PlayStation ever. Maybe the more interesting thing is engagement is higher, but people are seemingly buying less games because half of that revenue is going to a select few titles based off content add-on, because these are concurrent live service games that get regular updates. People can play them all the time, long term, and feel no pressure to go out and buy, a boxed retail game or something like that. So we can see just how different the industry is now versus PS4, which didn't even seem like that long ago. Now, the two other standouts here is Bluepoint Games being listed as a partner studio. I know some are looking at that wondering what's going on. I thought they were making their own game based on original content. I would assume this just depends on how Sony is framing it, because Bluepoint, I mean, technically, sure, could be considered a partner studio, even in the sense that, like, okay, they've done collaboration work with Japan Studio at the time, right, for Demon's Souls, or they're considered a partner studio for working on God of War Ragnarok. They did a lot of outsourcing for Ragnarok on that game, and that's partly why people think right now they're possibly doing a new God of War spin-off or Atreus game, right, so that would fall in line with a new game, but it's original content from their point of view. So but they would probably, if that was the case, as an example, not saying that's happening, but if that were, they would be working very closely with Santa Monica. Santa Monica probably overseeing a lot of what Bluepoint is doing for working on that IP, right? Santa Monica would have a lot of say in terms of, well, this is what this character would do. This is how this world is being shaped. This is how we want it to influence what we're doing next for God of War. So that's why they might be a partner studio there. The other thing is AI. So efficiencies in the business. As I've said before, like, AI does have a place. We're absolutely going to see it be a part of the development pipeline for major AAA studios, but it's, in my view, about extending human work and not necessarily replacing it, or certainly not doing it as quickly as we possibly can. But from the corporate strategy meeting where you have Yoshida-san mentioning that, oh yeah, this could be used for quality assurance, and now hearing it here for speech and localization. A lot of these are contract jobs, and so without a doubt in my mind, I mean, that's where a lot of people are going to be out of work, which is, that's not how I wanted to see that play out. But going into the QA portion of the business segment briefing, this is where we got a lot more insight, because really these questions were they were firing off. They were very direct. And so we got some clear answers from SIE. So this was, we had Lin Tao, Herman Hulst, and Hideaki Nishino do this live. So right off rip, somebody asked about the industry-wide layoffs. They were asking, what is that reflective of, if investors should be worried, or if that's a natural evolution. Hideaki Nishino says they want to grow and they want to provide more room to do that. It seemed like he maybe was not well prepared for that answer, but Herman Hulst did step in and say they want to optimize the business, and he does admit that there's been a slight adjustment on the backfall of the pandemic rather than the industry itself. So he believes the business is in a very good position, and that it's more reflective of the pandemic, aka he's saying we and everybody else overhired. So that's kind of what he's getting at there. But somebody then asked about the profit and loss regarding game releases, and also the relationship between PC and console, and if there's going to be any cannibalization, or if they're seeing any cannibalization, and also progress on their mobile strategy. So Nishino-san says that when they sell on PC, the entire customer base grows. That's how they consider it. They consider it expansion. The value of the console is still very important to the business, but he does admit that some customers may move over, but it's more an opportunity for growth overall. Herman also comments on game development costs, and he does admit that they are high, but he does say they have a rigorous portfolio review process to consider a title's viability, and they're looking at more code development opportunities right now, and also outsourcing as well. He actually does mention the development resources high on the American West Coast, so more or less he's saying labor costs are high, and he's sort of indirectly citing the cost of doing business in California, maybe also Washington as well, and I personally would also assume Austin and Montreal are on there as well. Those aren't exactly cheap places either. But Herman also talks about PC, so he does confirm that for single-player games, it's still a very careful, strategic thing for them. As an example, he says he hopes PC releases actually encourage people to check out the sequels on console. As for mobile, he does say that they're taking a more measured approach in the space. He says PC is more console adjacent, so that's why there's been more progress there. But for PC, they're partnering with other studios like NCSoft and learning a lot about the space. Another question was about cost management. So again, all three SVPs explain the same thing here with the organization's target with reducing cost. Herman also comments on the Bungie integration and that Bungie, well, the returns for Bungie they've already seen very big advancement here with network services on that side for future live service titles, but they do expect the integration should mature by the end of the year, and the investment for the studio has not broken even just yet. So a lot to unpack on that one. Yeah, efficiencies is really the big thing. I mean, this is without a doubt the number one thing to take away from their next mid to long-term plan is that they've acquired all these studios. Labor costs are going up. They're looking to do outsourcing. They want to start using AI across the entire enterprise. They want to advance the space. I mean, they're looking to really reduce costs the best way that they possibly can. So it really is, I would assume, I'm not sure how much corporate pressure there really is to make these kinds of cuts, but that is without a doubt what they're focused on right now, like laser focused on doing. As for the PC stuff, this is maybe a surprising answer to me. I don't know if this is maybe more for the investor side and them not directly saying like, oh yeah, we plan to eventually do day and date PC because that would maybe spook investors. But I think we all know that's maybe not like the best way to do it because the PC audience, as we just went over, like they're not going to buy a console. Like the threads about this news on anywhere that's like for a big PC audience, they're like laughing at that news. Like, no, they're not going to buy consoles. And I've always been of the mind where it's like, if you're going to ship on PC, that's why you do it, because these two audiences, console and PC, are different enough. And then I'll say this too. For mobile, I actually enjoy this answer a lot. That is the way to do it. You know, we're kind of sitting here wondering, what are they doing with mobile? And the criticism here is, are they really going to just do more things, like throw things at the wall, see what sticks, these sort of short-lived programs and not really try in the space? Or are they going to really invest properly? And it sounds like that's what they're doing this time around. So there's that as well. Yeah, we've got a very good picture of the PlayStation business, I think, for the foreseeable future. We've still got big tentpole releases. For the time being, single player is still primarily going to ship on console first, then a year and a half, 2 years on PC. Still aggressively pursuing mobile and really advancing in AI and trying to reduce costs for what is a very costly business. I would say PlayStation is in mostly a good position. I think they're better positioned than others, which is maybe the best way to put it. And we'll keep following the PlayStation business as we often do. Moving on to our next news story, we have a very surprising update from last week, that being the story about Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann, where he was being interviewed by Sony themselves for Sony's own site, so it was very much dressed up for PR. And, he was talking about Naughty Dog's next game, and the quote that made a lot of headlines is that it could redefine the mainstream perceptions of gaming, and so, of course, a lot of people took issue with that. It sounded, very corny or kind of whatever, maybe a little bit pompous. People obviously, this was a big conversation topic, but it turns out Sony really changed what Neil said by a lot. So Neil put up what he actually said on Twitter. He called Sony out, and they changed the entire thing. It's crazy. They did him dirty. So it was a much bigger answer that really dives into the idea that, these recent successful TV shows can show non-gamers that there's all these really great narratives being told in games, and that for the actual full quote near the end, this is what he says. He says, and I quote here, "I think right now we've hit a tipping point where it's about to take off, where people realize, oh my god, there's all these incredible moving experiences in games. So I'm not only excited for this game that we're making, and it's something really fresh for us, but I'm also excited to see how the world reacts to it. Because of The Last of Us and the success of the show, people even outside of gaming are looking at us to see what it is that we put out next. I'm very excited to see what the reaction for this thing will be, and I've already said too much about it. I'll stop there. So you're asking me for my dream projects. I've been very lucky to have worked on my favorite games with incredible collaborators, and I'm very thankful for them." Now, after this was put out there, Sony actually did take down the interview, where in its place it says, "After reviewing what was said, they found several significant errors and inaccuracies that don't represent his perspective." I feel so bad for Neil, dude, because this guy catches so much heat already for seemingly, again, no reason, right? There are some that have a serious axe to grind against Naughty Dog and Neil, and they hate the guy. And look, it's the internet, right? So social media can be a brutal, toxic environment. So if you have any sort of account somewhere, you just get all this stuff thrown at you if people do dislike you. So it's got to be like draining for the guy, right? So to have this happen to him from the company he works at, right? The parent organization twisting his words and giving more people a reason to hate him or throw all this, flack at him. It's got to suck. He must have been so pissed. I wonder if he did reach out internally or if he really just straight up was like, no, I'm going to make this public and set the record straight right away, which good on Sony for taking the interview down. But it's like, dog, how could you do that to the man? That's just crazy. I even said last week, it's like, man, this thing reads like total PR nonsense. I was curious, like, how much of that is Sony? Are they encouraging him to say that? But it was a matter of like, no. Neil he gave a very nuanced answer that was very grounded and just talking about more the broader industry. And that's what they did. They completely changed it. That was disappointing to hear, but that is what Neil actually said. In other Naughty Dog adjacent news, we can also mention for The Last of Us HBO Season 2, another cast member has been confirmed. And I love this because Jeffrey Wright is reprising his role as Isaac for Season 2, where he played Isaac in the game, in the Part 2 game. So just like what we saw with Marlene, with Merle Dandridge playing Marlene in the show, I thought that was awesome. That was super, super cool. And so Jeffrey Wright, I think that will fit quite nicely, especially because Isaac can be such a sort of menacing and maybe intimidating character with his arc as well. So I think Jeffrey in the flesh can nail that quite well. I'm very excited for that. Moving on to some interesting tidbits we learned about Helldivers 2's development cycle. This comes from a recent presentation at the Nordic Game Convention where Arrowhead's now CCO, Johan Pilestedt, did the presentation himself. So it's pretty interesting. I'll link it down below. It's about 40-50 minutes long. He kind of goes over just, what it was like to ship the game, develop it, and also the release of it as well. But we'll quickly point out some things here. So when they were asked about doing Helldivers 2, that being Sony, they thought it would take about 4 years, but what we know now is that the game took just under 8 years. Also, at a certain point during development, they had a really good prototype, and both Arrowhead and Sony agreed that it could be even better, and so that was something where Sony doubled the budget, and Arrowhead agreed to it, so that's great to hear. And then Johan also said that a key principle for the game was making it accessible and earning the right to monetize, that being to price the game at $40 and make sure that you're supposed to entertain consumers first before thinking about how you'll monetize further. Earn the right to monetize is how he puts it. And he also described the launch experience for the studio where they were expecting a peak player count of 150,000, but it was actually 750,000. So we can see the split there too with the PC numbers, because the CCU count for PC was like 450 something at the time, right? So we knew that another 300,000 were probably going to PlayStation 5 players as well. But yeah, always love hearing that stuff. It's even more interesting knowing that Sony really believed in this property. Really, it's almost puzzling in a way, right? Because 8-year development cycle for a live service title, an IP that was still unproven given the first release. But yeah, that was very cool to hear. Definitely watch the whole thing if you're interested. Moving on to some video game sales data. This comes from Matt Piscatella of Circana, which tracks video game sales data here in the US. And we've got some interesting stats going on for the month of April, where Stellar Blade was the #1 best-selling game ranked by dollar sales for the month of April here in the US. Also, Helldivers 2 was #1, and then recently released PS5 versions for Sea of Thieves is #4, and then Grounded is #12, so those games doing well for Microsoft on PlayStation 5. Also, Rise of the Ronin is right next to Grounded at #11, And then on the hardware side, PS5 is actually trending 8% ahead of PS4 on a launch-aligned basis as well. And Matt did point out another interesting part of Stellar Blade where it did debut strong, but historically it actually ranks pretty low. It's the lowest going back to best-selling games for April well, it would have went back to Prototype 2, he says, which was the best-selling game in April 2012. So it's like right near there, as in the game debuting number 1 is obviously good, but historically, like, that's a pretty low April, all things considered, which is just more illustrative of the slight downturn we're seeing in the more traditional console segment. But yeah, still good to see that Stellar Blade is doing well. Rise of the Ronin holding strong. No Rebirth, which is, probably more alarming for Square. There was a really interesting thread recently on X that dived further into, Square's position with what that game really needed to do in order to be more of a success. And really that speaks more for a lot of their games in the entire industry. But, the Microsoft properties doing well is also maybe not the most surprising thing ever. I mean, I at the time I thought like, oh, Sea of Thieves, I'm not sure how much demand there is for that game on PS5. Boy, was I very wrong about that. Even Grounded doing quite well also. Next up, we have a rumor about another Xbox game coming over to PS5, with a little caveat being that this game has not even been confirmed for Xbox just yet because it's planned to be announced at the Xbox Game Showcase, where this was initially reported by Insider Gaming. This is the new Doom game, so it's apparently called Doom: The Dark Ages, and it will be a medieval-inspired Doom world, and this should be announced on June 9th. But Nate the Hate, who's been privy to a number of things ongoing in the business, has quote retweeted this article on Twitter, and he mentioned that the game will be multi-platform and will ship on PS5. So this would be a new circumstance where we've had a lot of rumors, sure, but still it's only been 4 confirmed games and they're already out, that being Hi-Fi, Pentiment, Sea of Thieves, and Grounded. So we still don't know long-term how this will shake out, but this would be the first new announcement that is for Xbox and PS5. I imagine they won't say a single thing during the showcase, but then, during a press release after the show's over, then they'll confirm PS5. And my curiosity is, I guess, how this played out internally, right? Because we know there was a more recent U-turn of, okay, now we're doing PlayStation 5 releases, but if we assume it was different before, going back to when Bethesda was acquired and the language at the time was a case-by-case basis, in this game, given how long games take to make, I mean, this would have been 2021, the game was well in development for all consoles probably, so PlayStation included. Was this like an Arcane where they stepped in with Redfall and said, hey, no PS5, shut it down, and then at a certain point they were given the green light to start working on the PS5 version again, or did that game actually get the green light immediately on that case-by-case basis, and PS5 was always coming? That's what I would like to know. Not sure if we'll ever get that story, but either way, yeah, it seems like this one will ship on PS5, which is cool because that is an existing IP that's lived for a long time on PlayStation, so happy to see Doom possibly get a new entry. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are some of the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Sunday conversation was the MAU number on PS4, PS5, how I feel PS4 is probably going to have some better legacy years versus PS3, which is already very good, and then Wednesday was the State of Play predictions, which are now irrelevant because we have the State of Play reactions and impressions from yesterday, which is also live on the channel, so if you did not see the State of Play, you can go watch the whole thing with me. And then, going forward, we might do more conversations on Sunday in the interest of, very busy weeks where LTPS might be very long, so we can just do a separate story over the weekend, especially if it happened, between, let's say, Friday and Sunday, right? So something that we maybe missed. We might do more of that going forward. It also buys me more time upload-wise for these other projects that I'm working on that are just taking a little bit longer to come together, but yeah, we might do more of that. And And we got Summer Games Fest coming up, so still more gaming news that is going to be popping off. But until then, that is it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.